I don't believe that you should be in business unless you're going to be the best.
Kris, you're in a very unique position that a lot of people, I think, sometimes want to be in that position. You're an influencer by every stretch of the imagination. And in today's day and age where influence is meaning not only do you talk to people, but they talk back, right? And I wonder, how often are people approaching you with these good ideas? I mean, you said in masterminds, you said in all sorts of things. How often do you get approached?
Oh my gosh, I think I get hit up. It's countless times a day. I actually have people that read all my emails and read all my social and help kind of filter through all that so that I can find a way to really connect and respond to people that are earnest seekers of partnership or things that we can do together. So, it's interesting with millions sometimes of organic views across all platforms on a daily basis. That means that I do have all sorts of fascinating things that come my way. There's people that are sharing their business ideas. They want to extend partnership to me. They want me to be a business advisor. They want me to invest in something. They want to get my opinion on something. And literally like the opportunities are countless. And up until, a few months ago, I was just ignoring all of them because I just didn't have bandwidth. There's so many bad ideas in there.
Oh yeah.
But there's also really good ones. And I'm like, I do not have the time to wade through all the bad ideas to find a handful of golden opportunities. And finally, I felt guilty about it. Actually, after a few years, I said, you know what? I'm going to hire a professional vetter.
Yeah.
And the person that I found, Trent Levitt, who's my workout buddy.
Trent's a stud.
Yep. Trent was in forensics doing deep background, deep dive research on digital fingerprints. Basically, FBI would hire him and say, we found a guy. We think there's foul play on something that went down. Can you find digital forensic evidence that he did it or she did it? And the dude comes from some of the most fascinating stories that I've ever heard in my entire life. I can sit around the campfire for hours and listen to Trent talk about how some guy tried to poison his wife and some woman was cheating on her husband and just, there's all the crazy stuff that goes on out there. And then obviously the really dark stuff as well. Well, when I had the opportunity to extend a job to him, I said, listen, you're really good at research. You're really good at digging. So here's what I want you to do. I get all these opportunities on a daily, weekly basis. I want you to dig through and see if there's some gems you can find in here. And over the last 4 months, we've engaged in almost a dozen new business relationships and partnerships with people that were hitting me up because like you said, social media, I talk to them
all the time.
They talk back.
Yeah.
And so most of the time I'm saying, hey, get my books for free. This is my brand new Have It All book that just came out in physical format.
Awesome.
The audio book is, I spent 3 days recording it.
Beautiful.
I'm super proud of it. But the physical book, after all the delays in China, finally got here. So I love giving my gear away. It's fascinating though when people come my way and say things like, hey, we are on our 3rd round of clinical trials with the FDA, and we believe that we found a cure for type 1 diabetes. And as you know, type 1 diabetes is not lifestyle driven. It has to do with malfunctions in your insulin levels in the body. And this company is like, we want to bring you on as a consultant to help us, by the way, organize our company. We want you to help prepare us for fundraising needs, exit reasons. Will you do that? And we've been vetting them for a few months, and there's a good chance we'll come to a deal. But another guy's got a trucking company. And one of the things that I love doing is I love adding value. You see, this is the problem with the human psyche. We start small and then we go big. And most of us will never go big enough to achieve our dreams because we start too small. Like a good example of that was a nervous 22-year-old who bought his first investment property. And it was a tiny little 1954 bungalow. And I could barely bite that off. Yeah. And then after I rented out the basement, I lived there for free. And I'm like, man, this kind of tastes good. I should do this again. I bought a second property and rented it out for a $600 a month positive cash flow. Sold that home years later, made $130,000 of profit on that. Then I did a 3rd home, a 5th home. I got up to 25 homes, had a 6-figure residual income. And that's when I quit my job. It took me 4.5 years to do that. Now, if I'm going to work for 40 years, I took 10% of my life to become financially free. I get it. There's a lot of people who are like, dude, you lucky dog. That's so amazing. You figured it out. But now at this stage in the game, I know cheats and hacks that are worth talking about today that all bleed down to this one statement. I heard it once from Tony Robbins and I'm living it all the time. He said, you're one relationship away from lifetimes of income. And when I heard that, wow, that is such an ostentatious statement. What does he mean? Yeah. And what he meant was this principle is proximity to power. That is, if you know the right person that has the right background, they can 10x or 100x or 1,000x what you're doing. Well, this is what's happening in the marketplace. So let me tell you an example about this one gentleman. I won't disclose his name, but he has a trucking company. He found me on social, ended up going to one of my live events. He's got I think it's like 13 trucks. And he says, Kris, I have 13 paid off trucks and we are printing money. Every one of these trucks is making, 6 figures a year.
Yeah.
And we now want to scale and go faster. So I had my digger dig in, and here's what we found out. They're only doing cash deals and they have trust issues with others, which means they're set up to grow traditionally, which is slow. And so they said, well, Kris, if we did some kind of consult for equity, brought you into our company, small bit of ownership, but your advice could allow us to really blow this thing up, what would you do? And as I did a little more digging, I found out that they had a solution to the number one problem in trucking. Do you know what the number one problem in trucking, which by the way is the number one career in America today? The number one problem is finding truck drivers.
Interesting.
It's hard. You know where they find their truck drivers?
No.
Mexico. They have lineups of people that have proper licensure that can drive trucks. So American companies that are hiring Americans to drive American trucks in America have a problem. They have a supply and demand problem with not enough drivers. But this American company that is out of Mexico, they found a solution for it. So I'm like, okay, these guys, they got a trucking company, they have an X factor. What are they missing? And I basically sat down with them and I said, well, if I were you, here's some of the things that you're missing right now. Number one is you need to use leverage, which means what does it take to get into a car on leverage? They said, you can get into a truck for technically $0 down or even as little as $20,000. And I said, great, that's what we're going to do instead. They said, well, if we do that, we're going to grow probably 7 times faster. I says, no. That's if you are saving up your own money. That's your second crime. You now have 13 trucks. You have a model. You trust your model. You go borrow money. They said, well, that sounds kind of risky, Kris. I said, then bring on investors and share the risk with them and give them the upside. And they said, well, what does that look like? I said, charge an investor $20,000, run the truck, let it make, let's call it $100,000 of profits, and then split them equally, 50 for you, 50 for them. They're like, well, that'd be great. We could, I said, how many trucks can you do in a year? They're like, dude, we could probably do 250 trucks from 13. I said, great. Now you're building a company with 9-figure exit. On their own, because they've never done that before, that's scary. And this is what I find with most business owners. They're trapped inside their business as an operator. They don't know what it feels like to have scaled their business to the point where they have a CEO running it and they're sitting on a board of directors having 1 or 2 meetings a month where they're only putting a couple hours into the business. And so because they've never been there, they bring me in, I help get them there. And then it's like, wow, you got me my time back. We're making a lot more money and now we're scaling. So a lot of the opportunities, Casey, that I'm finding out there, it's actually, if you're like, well, Kris, what are you really doing? The big picture is that because I've been where they haven't been, all I'm doing is stepping in as proxy and saying, trust me, this is a course of action you're ready for now. Their gut response is always, no, that's like 5 years out. And I'm like, that's 5 minutes away. Best encapsulated, couple of things. I was talking to Roland Frazier, who shared with me an interview that he did with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And when he was interviewing, he asked Arnold, he says, hey, what for you has been the secret to success? He says, I've been defying some very poor advice that I hear everywhere. Like, what's that? Like, when I got into bodybuilding, they're like, well, start small and then work your way up. When you get into acting, take the small gigs and work your way up. When getting into politics, start on city council and work your way up. And he did the opposite. Go big or go home, which meant that guess who his trainer was when he started bodybuilding? Mr. Universe. Guess when he went to Hollywood, what he did? He turned down all the small gigs until he got Conan, until he got Terminator. And he just literally went big. Politics, he just said, why would I sit on city council for years? Make me governor.
Yeah.
Right? And that's exactly what he did. So he attributes all of his success from starting at the top.
Interesting.
So when people come to me, the number one crime they're guilty of that they can't even articulate because they don't know what they don't know is that they simply think too small, and it's an expression of their comfort zone. And for anyone that's watching or listening today, my advice is take a look at your operating system and what you're working on. And here's my question. Right now, are you catering to your comfort level or are you catering to your potential? Because if you're catering to your potential, you're going to play a lot bigger than your comfort zone is going to allow, which means that the real game is a game of courage more than taking the time to incrementally grow. those are the things that I'm doing with people these days is I'm basically helping them step into a bigger game than they personally feel ready for. But if they are aligned with someone like me who's been there and done that, then they have reason to have confidence that it's going to work because their partnership to me now says, I'm not alone. And if I got Kris on my team, I am ready to play that big now.
I love it. So I want to try to give people a little bit of a hack here. So if somebody approaches you, get a lot of people approaching you, what are like 3 or 4 things that they should have ready? If they're like, hey, listen, I want to hook up with the best, right? And they come to you, like, what is Trent? What are you guys looking for them to bring to you?
You know, if you've ever watched Shark Tank, obviously the sharks are first saying data, data, data. Give me some numbers. What are your P&Ls? And so if you have an idea, just know, first of all, that I'm not interested in investing in ideas. In the world of business, you have what's called seed round of capital, which is I invest in companies that are startups. Then you have venture capital, which is, well, we're going to go on an adventure. We're going to venture some money in a company that's been around, has proven some baby steps. And then you have private equity, who basically says, you must have proof of concept. We want to see track record. We want to see scale. And then once we see that you have those things, we will dump massive amounts of money in you. Of those 3, guess who gets the most winnings? The startup they're taking the biggest risk, so they have the biggest upside. Yep. Venture capital gets the next biggest upside because the company is still small, but it's got its legs underneath them. And private equity can do very, very well on large volume, but they're taking the least risk because the company is now already established. So when people come to me, I want to know, what phase are you in? Like, are you at the idea phase? Or are you at a startup phase where you have some baby results? Or are you at a venture capital phase where you say, well, no, we've proven the business. Like, we're doing $1 million a year, or we're doing $10 million a year, but we don't know how to become a 9-figure company overnight. How do we grow that fast? So to answer your question, the first thing I like to just know is, do you know your numbers?
Okay.
Like, do you know your margin? Do you know your revenue? Do you know your expenses? Can you read your P&Ls, your profit and loss statement? For a lot of people, that's really intimidating because they're like, geez, I'm not an accountant. Isn't that what I have accountants for? It's like, well, in all fairness, the language of business is accounting. And so if you can't read a P&L, you probably shouldn't be in business, because that would be like showing up at a sports event, like a football game or a cricket game, and not understanding the rules.
Right.
How can you as a spectator enjoy the sport if you don't even understand that the objective is to get the ball somewhere, or how it needs to go, or how many times that you have to do that? And so my first thing is, well, do you know your numbers? I think my second thing is, how big is your appetite? I don't care how smart you are. I care how much hunger you have. I'll take a hungry person over a smart person any day of the week, because I don't know if that's as much of a compassion play because of my humble beginnings, or if that's simply more about the fact that no matter how smart you are, when it hits the fan, the amount of passion you have matters more than anything, which that translates directly from hunger. And so, if you're like, well, Kris, I'd be satisfied if I made, $1 million a year. I'm so happy for you. And I am absolutely not the dude for you, because you're small time.
Yeah.
Right. You're not stretching your comfort zone far enough, fast enough. If I can't help you 10x your company in a short time frame, then this was a waste of my time and maybe yours. Maybe you got the upside, but for me, doubling or tripling something is not very, very exciting. So I want to work with people that have hunger and ambition, more than anything else. So do you know your numbers, and are you hungry? Those are probably the 2 things that I look for. Then this is the third thing. Are you willing to innovate?
Oh, okay.
Which means that I don't believe that you should be in business unless you're going to be the best. My wife says, Kris, I think I've gotten to the point where I'm serious. I want to open a crystal shop. I love these minerals. I have this great growing collection. I think my wife expanded our collection by a couple $1 million this year. This is something she loves doing. She says, Kris, I want to open a store. And I said, okay. She's like, will you help me? I says, it depends. She's like, you're my husband. What do you mean it depends? I said, well, it depends whether you want to be the best. And for a moment, she got intimidated. She's like, well, like the best? I'm like, as in everyone around the country wants to fly in and see your store. And she says, well, that's kind of subjective. I said, it's not subjective at all. The best in business is always defined by 3 things. You're the cheapest, you're the fastest, or you're the best at what you do, as in you have incomparable products and services to anyone else in the marketplace. Those are the 3 different ways of actually being the best. Superior product and service, You are the cheapest or you're the fastest. And by the way, that's a triangle, and you can only be two of those three things.
You can't live in all of them.
If you try to live in all of them, you will fail. You can't do all three. You can't be better than all the competition, cheaper than all the competition, and faster than all the competition. That company will go belly up. But you can be the best in two of those three. And so I said, you know, give me your definition of best, and I need to know if we're going to do it once and right, or if you want to kind of take baby steps, because I don't believe in starting at the bottom. I believe in starting at the top. So I think those are the values that I really start with is, do you know your numbers of what your business is? Do you have some track record and some history? Do you want to be the best? And are you hungry? And so being the best then really does tie into innovation, because part of being the best in today's world means we have found a way to get an edge on everybody else. Innovation, constant, never-ending improvement, canny, as Tony likes to call it, Tony Robbins. It's this idea that to be better than everyone else, you can't compete and play the game the way they're playing it. You have to rewrite the rules at a higher level. And as long as you're willing to do that, then yeah, my team will take a look, we'll vet, and then if it passes the sniff check, I'll get involved and we'll look at, you know, seeing whether it's a fit for us to do business and become partners.
I love it. I love it. So there you go. If you have an idea for Kris or Trent, make sure you got those things put in place, or else we're not even going to be chatting with you.
Yeah. And listen, you guys can go to, you can go to kriskrohn.com and go to support and drop an email, and you can say, hey, who can I chat with in Kris's staff? His name's Trent, by the way, because I've got a business idea, or I'm ready to 10X my business, or I'm very serious. And I think Kris might possess the Rolodex, the skill set, the people, the everything to take it to the next level. You could then just go to kriskrohn.com, hit up support, let them know that you have that. You should work your way over to Trent Levitt, and then he'll be in touch to, look at some of that initial criteria. And who knows, if everything's lined up well, we might be business partners.
Give your next business partner. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for another episode of Have It All. Have a great day.